Okay, it is 4 p.m. We'll call the Committee on Public Safety to order. Please let the record reflect that all members are in attendance. I'd like a motion for the April 8th, 2025 minutes.
So moved.
Okay, proper motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have public comment on agenda items for up to 3 minutes. If we have any members of the public who'd like to speak now, before we move into the agenda, you're more than welcome to take a seat at the table. Okay, no comments. We will go on to item 5B, resolution for orders to make safe or demolish 1044 Ontario Street.
I'm going to very quickly move on table.
All right, we have a motion to untable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, Raleigh, please go ahead.
Absolutely, thank you. 1044 Ontario, we are joined sitting across from me is Jordan, who is the property owner. This one was tabled for the last few months for further effort. I'm happy to report as of today, since we've last spoken at a committee meeting, Jordan does have a final, or had drywall was approved on April 7th. He does have a final mechanical inspection for this week on the 15th. Same day, he has a final plumbing inspection. As soon as both of those are finalized, which our office expects those to pass based on what we've seen, Jordan will be able to schedule a final building inspection shortly thereafter. And that is all that is remaining. We've spoken about this one previous, where our chief building inspector has inspected this property. And as of today, we would not red tag this or consider it in unsafe conditions. I would feel comfortable either asking for a recommendation to discharge, if not pass a 60-day make safer demo. I believe, and Jordan can confirm, that he'll be done with all of the work within that time frame.
Sir, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yes, making good progress. Last meeting, I presented a timeline. I'm sticking to that timeline pretty good. All my plumbing is done, bathroom is finished. Paint and flooring are the main things. Touch-ups, like I said, have a final inspection, get code compliance in there. Red tag. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from committee members? Questions?
So just appreciate the timeline and you here adhering to it.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, I'm so pleased with what you've been so consistent in showing up and showing progress throughout this whole process. And I know it's not easy, but you're making it happen. And so I'm very pleased with that. Do I have a motion either to discharge or 60-day make safe or demolish?
To stay consistent with this committee's practice, I am going to move a 60-day make safer.
Okay, we have a proper motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Good luck with the rest of your activities with the property. Okay, item 5C, resolution introduction and to set a public hearing to amend chapter 1460, section 1460.49, subsection A, to require that rental dwellings have insurance covering tenant relocation costs. Do we need a motion to introduce, or can we, sorry.
No. We can discuss.
Okay, would, please, let's have a discussion on this item.
Yeah, so this is something that, sorry,
No?
Chair. This is something that Greg Vanker, the city attorney, and myself, along with countless other council members over the years have been working to achieve.
Mhm.
Essentially, this puts in a safeguard for folks when a house becomes uninhabitable, unsafe. That there will be coverage if they have to go to a hotel, and that cost will be covered by either the landlord or the city through this fee process. What we have found is a lot of people will not come forward with issues within the house because they have nowhere else to go. Whether that's through a bad landlord or you stay quiet, we keep the rent down. This gives someone for a path forward to be able to speak up and say, there's some really unsafe living conditions, i.e. sewage in the basement, 4 times in the last year and that has actually not been fixed. Things like that. It would give them, instead of hearing from people saying, I don't want to come forward, or please don't share that because I have nowhere else to go, they now can come forward and they would have somewhere to go. This would give 30 days as the total time that it would pay for. Law's thinking on this, if I'm understanding it correctly, would give them enough time if the owner does not fix the life safety issue, that we can take them to court to address the matter. So this does a lot of different things.
Mhm.
Now, there is in the first part of this, because I'm sorry, I'm talking about both parts, but
Right.
the first part is the insurance requirement.
Mhm.
It's my understanding, do you know who in the office did the research on the rider?
I don't know who.
Okay. That they did research on this rider that is available to landlords through their insurance companies at a minimal cost is what I understand, to cover them. Otherwise, the fee would come into effect if there was not some sort of coverage on the property, if it were to become red tagged to an unsafe condition. So this is the start of the next thing. The other part of this is, it's my understanding, they still can get a certificate if they don't have the coverage.
That's not the way the ordinance reads to me.
The way we read, the department reads it the opposite, that
In order to receive a certificate of compliance, the owner must provide proof of a valid insurance policy providing coverage for tenant relocation.
But then it says a violation of this code shall not prevent the issuance of a certificate. Line 14.
Or I would need to speak with the city attorney about that specific question. And that's, it was my understanding that it would be required in order to issue.
And thank you for asking that question, because I had a question similar to that, because when I read these together as, two ordinances that somewhat complement each other, it was unclear to me if they had to have the insurance in order to have a rental certificate approved. Because the next step is, should you not have the insurance, you do receive the fee from the city for relocation. So that was also a question I had, is how does this work together?
The way I understood it, and again, I will need to discuss in more detail clearly with the city attorney, but when a person applies, the insurance is essentially a year to year. There are certain dwellings that we have a multi-year certificate. So if for some reason that insurance were to lapse and then the property is red tagged for some reason and there is no valid insurance in place, then the fee comes in. But it was my understanding that on the front end, with issuing certificates, we were going to be requiring this insurance rider in order for the tenant. If you'd like, I'm happy to step out real quick and give the city attorney a call.
Well, and can you also clear up, are we prohibited? Because I thought the reason why this was inserted is that we were prohibited from speaking of a fee without this piece, and I could be wrong. Because if not, I don't see why we could just say the owner or the agent has provided proof, either provided proof of a valid insurance policy, provided coverage for tenant relocation, or, has agreed
Understands.
to or understands, chapter 1460.451 provisions within or something.
Which I feel more comfortable with.
Yeah,
And that's what I thought.
because plain English, Lisa, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's how I read this as well.
And I think my concern with this is, we'll end up seeing people just throw it onto the tenant.
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you, I've had good landlords reach out to me, and they, with that understanding, are not incredibly supportive of this because they feel like it's, once again, a good landlord being punished for the bad landlords. But as soon as, because my understanding before I actually saw the language was that it was either or.
That was
And
mine
so,
too.
and then as soon as I said that, oh, of course, we would adhere to that
Yeah.
anyways. So,
Yes.
yeah, so if you could get some clarification.
I'm absolutely happy to get
Okay.
clarification in terms of what you'd like to do for today. I mean, obviously, we're just setting this for the public hearing, so I'm happy to
Sure.
take your questions and bring it back. If you want to pause on it for now, and I can get you some answers via email later this week,
I think, so
whatever your
with,
pleasure.
with this here, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The owner of their agent, I think, Councilman Hussein, or understands section could be added. I mean, I guess that's a question. If you can take it back, can we just simply add, or they
Right.
understand section
So one of these other ones you're making changes on,
1460?
Yeah.
0.52 or 5.1?
0.49 or
0.51.
51. Yep.
0.51.
I'll just echo that I have heard the same from, I guess I would say landlords who don't necessarily have apartment complexes or multiple units, landlords who have single family homes. Again, it feels like why would we punish all landlords when we do have some bad actors out there? So
Right.
I would feel more comfortable with that adjustment, having that caveat, or with the understanding that, again, that fee would be paid should they not have. I do have one question, and maybe President Coss can answer this, or Law. What type of insurance rider is this? Is it widely available? Can you work with, I mean, if I have a standing relationship with an insurance company for business purposes and they don't offer this type of rider as a business person, what would, I mean, sure, you can go find another type of insurance, but if you have these things established, I guess I'm curious about that. Is it widely available? Is there an average scale, for these types of riders to be added on to insurance? I have some questions around that.
It is my understanding that it is generally pretty widely established, a relocation rider. So in the event, like, for example, when it's not homeowners, it's a very standard policy provision that if for some reason fire, flood requires you to have to vacate your home, they pay relocation. And so it's a relatively common
Okay,
insurance provision, insurance rider that you can get as part of the homeowner's insurance policy.
thank you. Raleigh?
I would add on, I'd like to add on, or at least maybe ask a question, and maybe Lisa and I can confer afterwards, and I've not seen the research their office has prepared. But in preparation for this, just in case there are questions from the department, we did talk to our two largest landlords, and they've spoken with their insurance agents, and it's not on their side. The message was the opposite. It's not a common policy. In fact, they don't have it anywhere in their portfolio in the state of Michigan. They're used to seeing it on the tenant side, the tenant obtaining it under renters insurance. But with insurance, I'm not an expert, but anything's possible with the right amount of money. And so I don't want to say that, counter OCA's opinion and say that it's impossible. I think it is, but I think that'll be something we'll want to know or hear from maybe the landlord community of what's that financial impact. Not to say that that's a deterrent of whether this ordinance should move forward or not, but I think it's one, especially if the department has to be the one to issue a cert based on whether they've provided this or not, something that may be taken to further verification. Happy to continue investigating on our end and report back what we can find, or at least point the committee to some landlord associations who may be able to provide testimony on that side.
Mm-hmm. A related question I received when I spoke about these ordinances coming forward and the discussion on them, a community member posed the question, we're looking at saying landlords should have this insurance rider, making that a requirement. What about tenants having renters insurance? I don't know of any provision or law saying that tenants have to have renters insurance, but can you speak to that at all? And I just wanted to ask the question because It was closed.
Yes, not without doing a little bit of research. I'm happy to add that to my list of questions to look into and get back to you.
Thank you. And I don't mean to open a can of worms, but I thought it was worth
appreciate the
asking.
question.
Comments?
Go ahead.
I just, I think that this, changing the language to make it either, or as I understood it,
Mhm.
is productive. I think the rest of it is, exactly what I was told about when I was going to be on council. The landlord lobby is strong. And if you try to make any changes, they're going to scream, the rent will go up, the rent will go up. I mean, we're going to be looking at universal trash later on and we're going to hear the same thing. You can't do that, or the rent's going to go up. Well, the fact is the rent has been going up constantly and there is very few safeties for tenants in the city. I mean, there are not, the state really ties our hands on what we can do.
Mhm.
So I think that with this modest change to understand it the way that I originally understood it, or you understand that you may have to make this, I think that this is a good written bill moving forward that took a long time to put together.
Yeah, and I think too, regardless of what argument is made, whether it's a rarity in terms of homeowners insurance as a rider, or if it's, we're concerned because we're gonna have to bake that into the cost of the rent. Well, the off ramp is 460.5 or 1460.51, right? And so there is this other option. And so I would be comfortable moving forward. I think for all three of these, we're being asked to set a public hearing for June 9th. I would be okay, and we can move them respectively, but move them with the understanding that the language is going to change. And then as long as we're not told by law that we can't do that, that's what we're actually going to be vetting as part of the public hearing. And as part of, part of the public hearing. Is that good?
Here's my next question.
Sure, yeah, so just so that.
So that we know for, yep.
I'm gonna get some answers to these questions. If we're able to make that change that you're asking for, you would like law to draft that change? And,
Yeah.
or do you want me just to, I guess, how would you like me to?
We can't, well, we could have law do it, but then I would assume that affects the timeline. Or we could move this forward and then explain that, right? And after public hearing, come back and then have that.
And put the amendment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to mess with the timeline.
So move it forward without the.
I think we're going to have to, yeah.
Yeah.
As is.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then we can come back.
okay,
Because at the end of the day, their office has to sign off on any change to this ordinance, right?
right.
Um,
I just want to make sure.
okay.
because
Yeah, so let's-
That we're making change.
no, I appreciate Lisa. We're making sausage here. So here's my agenda. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is then move the resolution to introduce and set a public hearing to amend chapter 1460, section 1460.49. And the public hearing, this is A, and the public hearing would be set for June 9th.
Have a proper motion. All those in favor say aye. Motion passes. Move on to item D, introduction and to set public hearing to amend chapter 1460, adding a new section 1460.51 to create a tenant relocation fee and renumbering the existing section 1460.51. Would you like to speak to this one as well?
Sure. This is just the part that sets the actual fee. What it would be is a tenant relocation fee. We worked with HRCS to come up with a number that what the cost is for a hotel, which will be set by, I believe by resolution by council each year, just like we would do any of the fees.
Mhm.
And this would, the city would provide immediate upfront cost, and then they would collect this from the landlord. And this is in the instance of, again, health and safety issues within a property. So serious reasons why people need to leave. And, I've heard that some people have thought this is a way for the city to shift the cost off of the city itself to pay for these, but realistically, this is another way to, that small 5% of landlords that have just not traditionally done a good job in Lansing. And I've been in the inside of their properties. This would give those people recourse. They wouldn't just be sitting there essentially losing what they've in some ways invested in as a renter, because their money, their deposit, the whole 9 yards. And now they don't have a roof over their head. This also would give enough time, as I understand it, for law to take legal action if nothing is corrected within that home,
Mhm.
that rental unit. So that is essentially the changes here.
Okay, and I have read this thoroughly. I don't have any questions on this.
I'm sorry, if I just clarify, we had some have a resolution passed every year about the amount. The amounts are actually contained in the ordinance itself. So it'll be a sum not that is equal to or that does not exceed 2550. I'm looking at line 7.3, and then shall not be greater than $85 a day nor for more than 30 days. So those are outlined in your ordinance, resolution.
But could we change that to a resolution by council so that we can review that annually? Because that $85 a day is very quickly going to not be enough. Right?
Sure. Sorry, I feel like my wheels are kind of spinning as
The last conversation I had with Greg about this, I thought that was the route we were taking with this. That's why
Yeah,
I said it.
I don't like it baked in like that.
Yeah. Down here, yeah.
Raleigh, did you have input?
My only input is on the call. Again, I'm not HRCS, so I don't know how they got to the 85, but I may suggest a friendly thought for you to consider is there at all an administrative fee added to this effort? You know, I know some of my questions that I shared with Member Cost, the author, are more on the operation. If this passes, some things for the administration to figure out how we administer thoughtfully. And one of the things we thought of at Code is generally we charge a fee for service for a lot of what we do. So if this falls onto HRCS or Code to actually make the said connection to a hotel, process an invoice to a landlord, that's city staff time. And so on our end, we do admin fees, demolitions, a handful of things we do. So I'm not saying that would have to be put in ordinance. That could be potentially a fee for service that we add on to our annual fee resolution. That was my only comment on this one.
And that makes sense. If we're also incurring staff time for this to get folks. I would imagine that if it's after hours, it looks something like the on-call code person. Well, I think the current operation is LPD or code compliance can call and HRCS makes the wheels turn on a hotel.
During the day, to my knowledge, HRCS does not have anything after 5 o'clock. And most of I imagine most of us enforcing this will occur, the wee hours of the morning. Right? So I think that's an operational question. We'll have to work with you. Is Code taking on that responsibility to make a connection to a hotel, or is HRCS willing and able to ensure somebody's on call 365?
Who makes the call now?
Code makes the red tag call. So if it's after hours, dispatch calls us out and we determine code enforcement if the property should be red tag. And if it results in a displacement of persons, we have our short list, which is the Red Cross, and they'll only serve if it's a fire damage. Anything else, it's family, friends. We'll follow up in the morning with HRCS, but they usually are limited on their hoteling. If it's during the day, then we'll absolutely make that outreach to HRCS during the day. Again, can't speak for Director Coleman, but I know her hoteling budget is quite limited. Goes quickly.
Is that just raised another question? So in your current practice, the only call you make is to Red Cross if it's after hours. Is that?
Yes, we encourage them if they have family or friends, make those outreach. But there's
And if that doesn't work, do you know what happens to those individuals?
If I recollect, when we had folks that were displaced, either code compliance or HRCS would be called by dispatch, and once the officer or dispatch approved such a move through code or HRCS, I'm not sure which, then Advent House would get called. They were doing the hoteling at the time. And now Holy Cross, I believe, is doing the hoteling.
I'm choosing my words right because I don't want to speak on behalf of HRCS, but I know in past recent experience, I don't know their perimeters of their hoteling program, but I've been told funds are limited, if not exhausted. And so when we've called, if the folks being displaced aren't disabled or elderly persons, the service isn't there. So then again, falls back onto us to encourage them to find family friends. If it's fire damage, Red Cross will step in and provide some temporary, very temporary shelter. But yeah, that's the tough part of the job, certainly.
Well, and I would think that reading this here that immediate temporary replacement, but then it has talks about the manager of code compliance in there. I think that it could be a pretty easy process, which is code compliance is the one that's going to come out. They're going to look at it. They're going to stick the thing on there, the red tag, and they're going to say, this is not safe to inhabit, which should just be an easy trigger of a partner that's already been set up, a hotel partner, whatever it may be. And then we've already baked in that the city would cover the initial cost, and then the landlord would kick in on the fee portion.
This definitely gives the assurance that somebody will pay, right? That's our big.
I was gonna say, because that front end process isn't changing.
No.
So I guess my question for Law is then, is there enough work here to do? Because we were talking about potentially adding language in terms of, a fee set by resolution, maybe including not just the total sum for the temporary replacement, but also admin fees. Do we need to maybe pull this back?
These are really great conversations.
Yeah.
And really, really good questions.
Yeah.
That really kind of added a lot of layers to it.
I agree.
I would, if you're looking for my recommendation, I would love to be able to take all of it back,
Right.
make whatever changes you guys are able to present a more finished, polished product at your public hearing.
This is just it's gonna be really messy for us to say, okay, here's what's up for a public hearing. Or what the committee's intention is,
Correct.
right?
If we,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
If maybe we wanted to table these until the next meeting, we could have some updated drafts to you. When is the next meeting?
No, that's okay. Going right there.
Thank you.
The next meeting would be June 10th. Oh, yeah. Or are we done in
There's
May?
a meeting
June-
after that.
May 27th, the day after Memorial. Which will still get something out to council on June 9th to set the hearing for June 23rd. So you still would have activity in June
Right, yeah.
on these
It's
changes if you
ultimately, it's
get
2
back
weeks.
into like on the 27th.
I think to get it right, and to increase the likelihood that this thing actually passes.
Okay.
So what do you need me to do for the first item?
Hold up, withdraw your
Yeah,
motion.
okay, so I'm gonna withdraw my
Sorry,
first
I didn't
motion.
mean to speak for
Sorry.
you.
I just wanted to make sure I did it right.
Okay, we have a proper motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do I have a motion to table these particular resolutions?
Move to table.
Oh,
Where's that? Can we just do it collectively? Or do I need to do it respect? I'll move to, here, let me see your agenda. We'll do it real quick. Sorry. I move to table the introduction and setting up a public hearing to amend chapter 1460, section 1460.49A.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Also move to table the introduction and setting of a public hearing to amend chapter 1460, adding a new section 1460.51.
All those in favor say aye.
Also move to table the resolution to introduce and set a public hearing to amend chapter 1460, section 1460.50.
Alrighty, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Although I'm sorry, that one is just correcting internal references.
It would be nice to have one complete package moving forward. I
No
agree.
problem.
Okay, does that take us to
1060.
F.
F? Okay. Item F, resolution, introduction and set public hearing to amend chapter 1060, section 1060.08 to authorize the code official to abate nuisances. Do you
Sure.
have an introduction for that?
Yes. So again, this was another working product. We found out that there was an issue with the trash from the curb to the sidewalk. This affects, changes it so code officials can enforce trash between the curb and the sidewalk, which they currently cannot do. That is public safety. And as we know from the budget hearing, public safety does not have a full-time position that actually does that. The trash that we are referring to is, you know, bags of garbage, couches, the whole 9 yards. This essentially puts it in writing that they actually can do it. This was past practice and then it changed. And so now we're, you know, putting it into the ordinance that will be the practice.
Mhm.
And it will certainly alleviate, it will also leave, the bins for the position that public service is requesting for that person to go around, you know, because there is an ordinance on the bins that we changed 2 years ago. But this will address at least the garbage that piles up at curbs, because people got real wise and figured out that they could put the trash at the curb and nothing would happen. If your grass is over 8 inches, though, something would happen, but not trash.
Thank you. Any comments from the department or legal?
Department appreciates the swiftness on this and is fully in support. Very excited, hopefully, to see this full passage.
Any other comments or motion from committee
And
members?
as it pertains to the language in the ordinance, you, sir, are the code official, correct? All right, so it'd be you or your designee. Okay, fantastic.
And I appreciate the code compliance office working with us on this diligently, and the city attorney's office to make sure that we're getting these things right. I think it's important that we when we find issues like this, that we communicated well and we got this, you know, done really quickly.
So before we move this then, so my understanding is now your office can take care of both the trash and the grass and the public right.
If this passes,
If this passes.
yes.
Correct. And then where are we at with bin enforcement? What's the latest and greatest of that?
So, yes.
But how does it, how operationally, how is it working?
My understanding is bin enforcement would work, you know, either through Lansing Connect complaint, or if we get the inquiry, we send it to public service. I don't know who on their team manages bin enforcement, but to my knowledge, that is not something we're responsible. We're happy to, if that's a consideration we want to make, happy to make it.
And I tried to float that idea as well with bins, and the city attorney was not completely on board with that idea. And I believe if we remember correctly from Andy Kilpatrick coming in, that it is just complaint based at this point with those bins, which is frustrating because we changed the ordinance 2 years ago.
Right.
Because they said it wasn't any way they could enforce it. So we changed it to have that enforcement. Carol was sitting right here, in fact. And then, you know, we still don't see enforcement. That's why they asked for that additional position in the budget, which would be a, I forget what they called it, but essentially someone that would be their role.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I would move for the introduction and setting of a public hearing to amend chapters 1060, section 1060.08 to authorize the code official debate nuisances, and that public hearing will be set for June 9th.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Okay, let's move to item G. This is a discussion item regarding zoning code 1250.02.08 and the Michigan Public Health Code. This stems from a question that was asked of this committee regarding an RV vehicle, recreational vehicle, and using that as a temporary housing situation on the individual's property. So to bring this up for a discussion item, I did contact legal and ED&P to get their feedback, and I wanted to have a conversation on that. So if you'd like to sort of state or recap some of the information that you had found.
I'll maybe start, see if Lisa or OC in general has anything to add. But when we first received this request, it's not the first time the department, planning and zoning office specifically, has received this. We've received this over the last couple of years, every now and then. And so there's a couple ways we looked at this. In the initial form, it's currently not permitted. Actually, there's no parcel zoned that allows for use of an RV in the city of Lansing. Storage is a separate matter that is allowed, as long as the recreational vehicle meets the length limitations for on property, as well as it being stored on an approved surface. So storage, set all that aside, that's allowed per ordinance. It's truly the use of the recreational vehicle on residential property is not permitted anywhere. So if a draft form was introduced to change that, okay, that's a start of the conversation. There's a campground that's actually on the east side of the city, but it's actually in the township. Cottonwood, I believe, is what it's called. Often folks think that's the city, but it's technically township. That would be the closest to my understanding where a recreational vehicle would be permitted to use. And so outside of zoning needing to be changed to allow this type of use, whether it be short-term or long-term, the additional concerns the department has is even on a short-term basis, what's the monitoring look like? What's the permitting look like? And solely because of the concern for electric utility hookups, if that's of a need, but also the disposal of any human waste, et cetera, commonly referred to maybe as gray water in the use. Currently use of a recreational vehicle on a residential properties just aren't set up for that type of use. And so I'm concerned on a department level of what would that enforcement look like on our ends? Would that add staff need for additional capacity? Would we be looking at it creating and enforcing new permitting to allow this use? In the comments I was CC'd from the city attorney and say that if zoning was changed to allow this, actually make them subject to all of the housing laws in the state. And so even a short term, maybe connecting that gray water hose to your sewer at the end of your driveway, that wouldn't be allowed. That wouldn't meet housing code in terms of sufficient sanitary disposal, let alone would connection to, just plugging into your outlet in your garage likely meet electrical standards and so forth. So I worry that while the idea sounds nice on paper, that the actual creation of an ordinance or let alone enforcement at the administration level would lead to more problems than what I think the effort or the question is.
Lisa, do you have any additional comments?
Raleigh stole my time. So, no, I agree with Raleigh. He's got it exactly right. An RV like this would need to meet all the requirements of the housing code, and not having that permanent hookup would not be compliant with the housing code.
And I do want to acknowledge that the resident who posed this question to the committee did submit photos of the recreational vehicle and had provided background at a previous meeting as to why this question was being asked. Do we have any questions or comments from committee members at this time?
I am curious. I know that we have communities, not necessarily here, but in northern Michigan, where they've built, basically built a home with these and they keep them on site year round. Do we know how they do that there? I mean, they build decks, they've got the whole thing.
I don't without looking. I mean, I can take some guess. I'm wondering if their sanitary is more permanent hookup. I'm thinking like a motor home or a mobile home park. Those utility hookups are more permanent than what a campground would allow for, which is why if we had a zoned parcel for campground, this type of use all day long would be allowed because they would be designed and set up a way for that temporary disposal and use. Happy to research that a little bit more. If you've got any municipalities or jurisdictions specifically, I can reach out to my counterparts.
I would be curious if there is. I'd be curious, actually. I know that, outside of those like designated, like you're on a lake up north thing, I'm curious to know if any of the cities within Michigan that have basically urban cores like we do have something on the books. Does Ann Arbor, does Kalamazoo? I don't know the answer to that.
We're happy to reach out. Absolutely.
I'd like to know more, and see what other cities have done.
I agree with that, and I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's
Sorry,
no,
if you had
no, I
a
didn't
comment.
understand.
You're right. It's not only that it sounds nice, it sounds like something worth pursuing and asking additional questions. And I believe if we have one resident who is finding themselves in this situation between their standards having to use this recreational vehicle, there have to be more, right? So this can help us address a variety of issues that we're seeing in the region, specifically in Lansing. And so I also am interested in any more information that can be put forward on this. Councilman Hussein, do you have a question or a comment?
Nope, my only question was going to be, and I don't know what you call this, urban camping temporarily, I don't know what you call it, but that was gonna be my question. Are there other municipalities in the city of Lansing, or sorry, the state of Michigan that are doing it, and how are they doing it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Just one final comment on the enforcement end because there's no pending draft in front of us, but assuming if this was to move forward in any way, shape or form, it'd likely fall under a zoning, which would then, if not comply, would be a violation. Saying this as a deterrent, but as a friendly reminder, any non-conform or any non-compliance with zoning does not allow the administration to abate themselves and would result in us complied going to court. So I just say that in terms of compliance timeline, that greatly extends that out many weeks in terms of the court's docket.
All right. We did have public comment at the beginning of this, but we do have the property owner and recreational vehicle owner here in the room, Joy Gleason. If you'd like a moment to make a statement for the record.
Thank you. So hearing some of your questions, having done some research into the state law allows any governmental unit lesser than themselves to allow up to 3 RVs on a property without having to become a campgrounds, without having to get a campgrounds license. You do not have to be commercial property to do that according to the state. So the state is not restrictive of this. There are many places, and the only urban one that I even know of anecdotally is Saginaw. And again, that's anecdotally that I know of, where they allow people to be in RVs. I lived in Buena Vista Township about 25 years ago in an RV, not in a campground, but resided in it that way. And that it does seem that the state law leaves it up to whatever governmental unit would like to put in whatever restrictions that they would. And the question that I have about the permanence of the utilities, I think that there should be the appropriate electrical connection, and that it would have to be safe according to all safety standards. But the sewage connection for black water or gray water, it almost, I don't know how it would be permanent, because I don't know how it would permanently affix to the vehicle. But in most places, the connections that you have, they have to connect without leaking. That's part of what has to be taken care of. And also wondering about certain things that you say about the temporary or permanentness of it. If you require some skirting, perhaps that it has to be skirted in order to apply more with standard residential properties. The RV that you see pictured there, when the slide outs are open, 10 feet wide at the widest part, it's 33 feet long. It has an ample amount of floor space for the number of people that it sleeps, or that can also be part of the ordinance that, per so many square feet, how many people. So there is a lot of room, a lot of leeway for you to put in parameters so that this is not something that, somebody with their tent is going to qualify for. But at the same time, it opens up the ability for more people to be housed out of the weather in a safe way.
Thank you very much for those comments. We appreciate it. Thank you for attending today. Not at this time. Thank you. Okay. So thank you for looking into that further, Raleigh. Appreciate that. Any other discussion before we move on? Okay, going on to item 6H, status updates. There is a list of properties on the agenda, demolition permits and or make safe on the following MSD orders by council. I can go through them one by one with the information there, or
Happy to take it one by one and you guys stop.
no, please go ahead. Yep.
Let's go with the first one, 1326 Jennison, that has been awarded to MCS Excavating. Just checked with the clerk on my end before coming here. We are still waiting. Contracts have been awarded, so they're still waiting to hear back from consumers and BWL on utility cutoffs. That can be a slow process, especially during the season on the utility providers. Pending the update from the contractor, we may reach out at least to our friends at BWL where we can have some influence over. But as soon as those utilities are scheduled to be cut, the contractor can pull their permit and schedule their mobilization. Those utilities have to be cut prior to demolition. So that
You said the contractors who?
MCS Excavating. We'll keep going. Walnut along with a couple others are the next to bid out. Walnut though was recently tax foreclosed on April 1st by the county treasurer. We did have a meeting with the county treasurer last week. It will not, as much as the county has asked us not to do the demo and disagrees with the demo, relayed, and they understand that council has acted and the is in effect. We confirmed with the county that the city will continue to proceed with the demolition this summer. We can't delay it because of a tax foreclosure, and the county did affirm that if we do it prior to the August 26th auction, that they'll incorporate that cost into the packet, hopefully to recoup as much of that back at auction. He did, and he, as in the county treasurer, did infer to us that a vacant lot likely won't sell for, let's just say, 20,000 if that's what the cost of demo is. So I remind, again, this isn't a deterrent, but if whatever he doesn't collect at auction, at the end of the year, he does bill that back to the local unit of government. But that's that's a side effect of the process.
Right.
And so now that we've got that confirmation from the county treasurer that we can still proceed, that's scheduled to be bidded out this month. 122 South Grand, abatement has been completed by the property owner. We've talked about this in committee prior, where the ownership has begun efforts on our end to demolish themselves. This is a commercial one. In fact, this is the first commercial make safer demo in recent time, if not ever. And so this differs from residential in terms of the scope of work. Most residentials don't require any form of environmental abatement, asbestos, et cetera. Almost every commercial property will and does. And so I confirmed, the administration has a copy of that abatement report as well as the completion of that. They did apply for their demolition permit last week. It's under department review. So that's building safety, receives that application. It goes to zoning administrator, and then ultimately the department director signs off. I've received a copy of the contract that they've signed. Assuming the department approves it, the Granger Company is planning to start demolition on May 26th.
But this is try to save the foundation.
We've confirmed with them that that's not allowed. The only way that we would allow any foundation of any demolition in the city to be saved is if they had plans to immediately build after the fact, right? This time they have not submitted that. So our demolition standards would require full removal. This will be a tricky one, and we've warned them of that, but if there's a will, there's a way. It's an old foundation, probably one of the original downtown foundations. And so they've got included in their contract quite a bit of special remediation work, including new sidewalks and so forth. So until they present the department with a plan to build on top, our inspections will be contingent on full removal of that foundation.
It's one of the oldest foundations in Lansing. That is a tragedy. That's a shame that the owners let it get to this point. Are they going to be looking for a brownfield still?
So while I'm on the LADC board, I'm not LADC staff. I can at least affirm and maybe redirect to Carl and his team. I do know they've approached LADC staff for brownfield, but as far as me as a board member, nothing has been brought to the board at this point.
Okay.
Well, for commercial, for you guys to vet and actually to approve a permit for their mobilization on the commercial side of things, not only do utilities have to be shut off, obviously, but then there has to be environmental, it has to be proof of.
Yes. And
Okay.
that's a first step. And so generally they get an environmental survey. If it was us doing it, we would, right? The only difference between us and this owner is we would have to bid that work out like we bid out the demolition. And so since they began that effort, and talking with the administration as well as city attorney, I have some discretion to make that, are they moving forward versus should we begin implementing staff time? And based on them sending me copies of that, sending me copies of the contract, our staff, Tina's team regularly goes out to see if that work is actually happening. And the answer has been yes. If it was for us to do this, which there perhaps are going to be some on this list and also other commercial, we would include that scope, that abatement work in our demolition bid. So we would bid those out together because some demolition contractors will do both, some won't. We'll make sure that effort is as expeditious as possible. 1612, we have not received any communications since the orders passed, so I did confirm that is in our next round to be bid out this month. Some of what, and if the question's there, why haven't we done that sooner? Staff capacity, but I'm happy to report we have a full clerk team in code enforcement as of yesterday. We brought on an additional clerk, and so that's bringing much capacity. That's where all of this work falls on is the code clerks to bid this out and so forth. So we have that full team. And so I expect when we get through this first round of bidding, Sandra and her team will be much prepared to move faster next time.
Do you have a date for the bids?
Get that to you.
And then I guess I'm curious if we could, if I can ask,
Please.
what does the process look like for bidding? Like, is it a drawn out process? Could you run me through it?
It's so we have to, so using Martin Street. So on April 15th, that's the last day that the owners have to make it safe or demolish it themselves. So the department won't look at it until the following business day, right? And then we go through an exercise to determine has it been made safe or has it been demolished? Pretty easy and quick. We go in BS&A. There's active permits or there's not. If there's active permits and they're substantial along the way, generally Tina and team will have a discussion to see how far is that. Are we talking they have a final inspection later this week or they haven't scheduled anything, right? Those are two very separate. Assuming they haven't done anything, then what we do is update title work. And then we have a set bid packet. We just change addresses. That goes to purchasing, Stephanie Robinson, and she's pretty quick, usually within 24, 48 hours, she has it posted. There's a memo that I have to sign and approve the bid. Again, it takes us, I think, from the moment we've determined it's not been made safe or demolished by the owner, about a week to get it to them to purchasing, now that we have a full team. 24, 48 hours later, Stephanie has it up, and that bid goes up for 30 days. After that, we pick the lowest bidder. Again, that's a memo that as director, I approve, gets routed. And as soon as Stephanie says that the mayor and finance have approved that, we can go to contract with the contractor. And then that's when they contact utility companies for disconnect. And then once they've been scheduled and disconnected, they apply with Tina's office for a demolition permit. More detail.
No.
Kavanaugh, 204 East Kavanaugh. This one is one where we're actually, it's on the edge because they passed on 4/15 when it was the order. They did pass a building inspection that day. We do expect a final inspection soon. However, if that's not occurring this month, we have notified them that it will be included in the June bid packet. 5141 South MLK, as well as the three after. I'll still go through the other three, but those are all the ones that their make safe date was this past Friday. Okay. So it's Tuesday, so the department just has begun looking at that, but I'll still go through. The owner of 5141 South MLK is here today. I did receive an abatement survey from him last night. I have not reviewed it. He's aware of that. That's just a survey. So that what a survey outlines is whether or not there are environmental things that have to be taken care of. And if there are, the owner can give that to a certified abatement contractor and get a scope of work. I received communication from him at the start of this meeting that it sounds like he's moving forward with that with a identified party. I will say that the owner has made attempts to secure a demolition permit through the building safety office. We have informed him that he is not able to pull a permit as himself. Demolition contractors are one of the 16 or 17 business licenses that the clerk's office has to issue. And so to be a licensed demolition contractor in the city of Lansing, one of the requirements is to be a licensed builder. Mm-hmm. To our knowledge, you're not a licensed builder. So that's why that he wasn't able to obtain the license through the clerk, therefore wouldn't be able to pull a permit in his own name. I haven't received that permit yet, but since it was just Friday was the order, again, we'll be working with him to make that determination if sufficient evidence to make it safe or demolition underway is ongoing. If not, then the department will consider it for bid. I will say if you've driven by that, I haven't shared with the owner, BWL, arrangement for BWL to use a majority of the parking lot for staging of quite a bit of the South Side road work. I have confirmed with BWL that they understand we have an MSD order, and if we are to demo or the owner is to demo, they will oblige and move whatever they need to move, and that won't be an interference at all. 308 Chavez, that is also.
Oh, Raleigh. I'm just curious, if you spoke to BWL, is BWL giving money to use that?
Don't know. I didn't ask that question. I don't.
That seems, because we did a make safe for demolish on that, that's could be concerning for me if taxpayer dollars are now going towards this property that we've put into demo.
Sure.
And could potentially have to tear down and never see our money again.
Right. I don't know. I'm happy to follow up and ask. I don't know if you want to.
I can ask Dick. I thought maybe you
Yeah.
might know.
I did not. They actually reached out to me because they weren't aware, at least whoever on their team that called me wasn't aware of the MSD. So we talked through that and I reminded them that we'll supersede whatever the arrangements they have. And that went all the way up to Dick and he understood. So
Sure.
I do have a brief question about the timeline. So you're going to go ahead and move through your process, but within that timeline, you'll still communicate with the property owner and see if any movement has been made. But that communication with the property owner doesn't necessarily stall or pause your work that you do
it
internally.
doesn't unless the department's made a determination that their efforts are actual positively moving forward.
Okay.
I use grain or the 122 South grant. It's one thing to show me a survey
Mhm.
of abatement. It's another thing to show me a contract, a work schedule, and to see that work commence. If those things weren't happening, then I would have made the decision to invest staff time to begin doing that due diligence ourselves. And so that is a bit of discretion at the department level. And so those are the questions we have. And we asked for Randy, I told him, I was like, all that sounds great. What you just told me, this meeting started. I need proof though. Send me an email that says, I, Joe Schmo, contractor, am starting this day so that Tina's team can go verify that. And if we disagree, we can make that decision to begin efforts on our end.
Okay, thank you.
Say most time we don't have communication from the owner. So therefore we assume
Right.
nothing and we move. Example, the next one, 308 East Cesar Chavez. No communication, that is next to bid. That has also been tax foreclosed. So that is a county treasurer owned and that is going to auction in August. Same as applies with the Walnut. Alan is understanding that closure won't suspend the MSD order. And we'll move forward with that one.
And even if it's not torn down by then, and then a new person purchases it,
Sure.
we don't have to go back through.
No, and what Alan will actually do is in the packet, we record the demolition order with the county register of deeds. And so then in the packet for public knowledge at the auction, they'll see if it hasn't been torn down, they'll see that a demo order is standing so that if they buy it, they inherit that. If depending on where we're at in the process, we'll continue forward. But let's say you MSD'd something in July and the due date was the 25th of August, the auction's the next day. Obviously the department wouldn't have torn it down, but in the packet, it'll have that order. So that way we can engage with the new owner late August, early September. If they show a willingness to say, I'm moving fast, yada, meets the discretion, we might back off. But if not, we move in and they would have understood that through the notification at the auction.
Now, if this is in the hands of, so this property has been taken over by Alan.
Chavez one, yes, it was foreclosed.
So technically, if we tore it down, he would be on the hook for the tear down bill.
We would send the bill to the county and the county would then, since it's tax foreclosed, would try to recoup it at auction. And then if they don't sell it at auction or they sell it for lesser, whatever is due to the city, by the end of December, they'll invoice the city back for that.
It's interesting because, I mean, they're technically the property owner now, correct?
They are, and I am going to lightly because I don't know all the ins and outs of all property tax law, but I'll back up a couple years ago. So if we MSD'd the house today and Alan didn't own it, any invoice code enforcement issues against a property that's not paid within 60 days, twice a year, we transfer it to city tax, and then the city tax bill. At the end of that calendar year, if it's been not paid to the city treasurer, they then transfer it to the county. So the county does pay us at that moment. And then it's a debt the county tries to collect. After 3 years or so, if the county still has 2 or more years of property tax debt not been paid, they, per Michigan law, can file proceedings for property tax foreclosure. it's wonky because yes, the county upfront pays us those debts. But long-term, they'll sell it at auction. If they recoup that cost, great, we're done. But if they don't, they do come back to the local governments. It's one of the residential MSDs, we don't see a lot of financial impact on the city side, but with these commercials, depending on the year, it could result in a sizable dollar amount that the city may have to pay the county if it goes that far.
And correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the statute. So it contemplates two auctions. And that first auction, they actually are required to try to recoup all costs, correct?
Yes,
The second one, okay.
they have some discretion. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but to alter that amount. Okay. So Chavez, the last two, Maple, 1300 West Maple, is one where we have not begun, even though the order was on 5/9, but I will state they have a final plumbing that was scheduled for just today. Their final, assuming it passed, their final building is scheduled for this week on the 15th. If both of those pass, they will have satisfied the MSD order. And then lastly is 1232 North Washington. That will be the next to bid. We have not received any communication from the property owner since the original order by city council.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, with no further business, we're adjourned at 5:01 PM. Thank you.